Hey there. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my relationship with grief. I haven't made a lot of videos like this, but I think I'd like to start. I've never been good at journaling, but something about this video journal format feels a little more on brand. I think it'll help me, and if it ends up helping anyone else, great. Before we dive into it, I just want to say I'm not a trained counselor. This is all pulling from my anecdotal experience. But still, I think it's good to create spaces for conversations like this. Part of the reason that I was motivated to make this video is because I've been thinking about grief a lot lately. Someone I considered a friend passed away unexpectedly a few weeks ago, and that's been pretty tough. It's also caused me to reflect on my relationship with grief in general and to think back on the times in my life where I encountered it in the past. So I figured I'd try and share a few of the lessons that I have been trying to learn. For the sake of concision and for the structure of the video, I decided to break it down into 3 key points. Number 1 is coping mechanisms. So coping mechanisms, we all have them. There's a lot of different things that can function as coping mechanisms, but there's this interesting concept I learned about from internal family systems therapy, which I recommend. And under this model of therapy, as I understand, things that behave like coping mechanisms are referred to as firefighters. So it's the job of the firefighter to respond to the fire, to put it out, to make the pain stop. And in that way, most coping mechanisms are doing a pretty good job. Part of what I've been realizing is that, it's okay to lean into those coping mechanisms, and sometimes it's necessary. On the flip side of that, coping mechanisms can look very different, Some are very helpful, some are less helpful, some can be pretty destructive. The main idea for this first point is just that it's necessary to have coping mechanisms, and that sometimes I'm gonna have to lean into them. But also to think about those coping mechanisms, to be mindful of them, and to consider which ones I'm leaning into, which ones I feel compelled toward, and to try to have some intentions related to my firefighters moving into the future. Okay, number 2 is sitting with discomfort. So this one's tough for me, y'all. For a lot of my life, I was very positive and riding these highs, and even when stuff was stressful or hard, I was really in the moment, in my coping mechanisms with people, doing stuff that kind of kept my mind off it, and that worked well for a long time. But also, as I've become more mindful of my coping mechanisms and of my, true inner state, I've realized that I can't just do that constantly. And that when it comes to processing the grief, I have to be able to sit with that discomfort, which that's something I'm still working on, honestly. Being in therapy on and off for the last few years has immensely helped me learn how to do that and why I need to. But it's gonna be a lifelong process. And this most recent experience with a friend of mine passing away, it has felt like an opportunity for me to practice that. I wasn't incredibly tight with this person, but I was close enough with them to really be struck by grief when I found out about this. And in a way that made it possible for me to feel as if I was able to ask my firefighters to hold off a little bit and take some time to just sit with that discomfort and that grief, and to just cry, and to think about that person, and to think about the people around me, to think about mortality. And it's pretty hard for me to do that, I have to say. But the more that I do it, the more I realize that I am processing the grief, that I'm understanding it more, that I'm incorporating it into my baseline. And not to say that I'm being sad all the time, because that's not true, but I'm allowing it to color my perception of the world a little more. And it feels like a much more holistic approach, not only to myself, but to the world around me. And I feel a lot less compulsive to lean into coping mechanisms all the time. It's also important to make time and space for the discomfort and the confusion and the pain. All right, so point number 3, this is a big one, is support system. So the common thread for me through my whole life, from when I first encountered grief as a young child and I didn't even know how to hide from it yet, all the way up to when I am encountering grief more consistently as an adult and I'm learning how to engage with it, the common thread is my support system. There's a lot of different things that can function as a support system, from family to friends to teammates to coworkers to communities of all kinds. And I've been finding that the more that I'm able to sit with the discomfort, to confront my grief, the more I'm able to lean on my support system, to share that with them, to collaborate in our processing of these difficult human emotions, because all of us inevitably will confront grief. So powerful to sit in those feelings truthfully and to validate them with other people, in ourselves and in others and in the world. It's, part of the human experience, I think, to grapple with these highs and these lows, and to do that together with other people. That's maybe been the most helpful element of how I have begun to process grief and to sit with discomfort and to move forward. Whoa! Yes. Hello. Hold on. Yo, it's Editor Leo here to deliver the surprise 4th and final point with a special guest to help deliver the message, as this point is creativity. I can't stress enough how much finding creative outlets and using them in times of emotional difficulty, how much that has helped me. It's really an amazing feeling to be able to sit with some of the pain and discomfort and transform that into something that feels productive, interesting, beautiful even. Creativity takes on a lot of different forms in my life, and it's not always coming from a place of sadness or pain, but I can say with confidence that some of the most meaningful artistic projects I've had have come from spaces or times of emotional difficulty, of grief, of pain, and to be able to have a record of those times, have a record of how I processed them, to move through them, has been incredibly empowering in my journey with grief and mental health and self-discovery. So shout out to music and video production and collaboration and everything else that has helped me process difficult emotions and transform them into something beautiful. Okay, with all that being said, let's throw back to Talking Head Leo. I'm not really too sure how this video is going to turn out. I always appreciate people's feedback, and if you have any thoughts about your own relationship with grief or any contributions on the topic, please feel free to share, either in the comments or in a direct message. Thank you so much for your presence in this moment. This is it's a meaningful moment for me, sitting here alone at home, but not really alone. And I hope that if you have been encountering grief, that you've been finding ways to process it, that your firefighters have been doing a good job, but that we're able to talk with the firefighters at least, and that you have some people that you can talk to about it. So, I'm sending out positive energy. Thanks again for being here. Until we meet again. Peace.